Well, it's in my personal opinion, there are a set of very clear guidelines in Western culture about the relationship between statutory standards in pieces of legislation and these laws. Laws, when people refer to the laws of natural law, they're talking about cosmic laws. They're talking about balances in harmony and getting in tune with nature, and the attempt is for the collective to discern those and to translate them into some specific codification for the assistance of everyone who doesn't have the time and energy to spend at that type of discernment. That's the task that is self-consciously assigned under a very specific theory of government, and that is the natural law school of justice in Western culture. There is an entirely separate and parallel school of thought, which is the utilitarian school of thought. And that is that, well, there's no way to really know, what these cosmic rules and things are, and therefore what you have is the people who run the government set up some laws that are very useful for the government. And so, for example, the utilitarians would say, sure, there has to be free speech, because if there isn't any free speech, the people get all kinds of out of joint if you suppress them, and they'll revolt. So, from a strictly utilitarian point of view, there has to be enough free speech to at least keep the people from rioting, right? Safety valve theory, okay? That's not how a natural law person looks at it. They say the reason that one has free speech is because it is harmonious with the way things are. And that there are these two parallel schools of thought in our culture as to what the moral grounding for law is. We just happen to be from the natural law school rather than the utilitarian school.
Isn't that actually the crux of this trial, then, in a certain sense? Is
That's exactly.
Two schools of law.
That's exactly it. There is a head-on confrontation between the black-letter utilitarian statutory law and this argument about the natural law. And the fact of the matter is that our system recognizes the superiority of the natural law. That's why, for example, in the United States Constitution, where it says that all men are created equal and they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, if there's a perfectly clear statute that says you can't gather in a group of 3 people and discuss your objections to a government policy, the natural law school people say, who cares what the law says? Who cares what that statute says? That's clearly violative of some of the most fundamental principles in our entire culture. And so you have someone, like Bull Connor saying, look, I've got this thing here that says you can't walk on the street in protest and carry a sign. The natural law, the Martin Luther Kings and the other people who come from a Christian social ethical perspective say, so what? I don't care what your statute says. The fact of the matter is, it is recognized inside our legal structure that I am endorsed in my right to do this. And if we get into a court of law, I'll show you it's true. I'll show you the cases, I'll show you the history, I'll show you the treatise, I'll show you that I'm right. But what happens is, you get into a court, and the black letter law people, who sit, and they're judges in both camps, and they get behind, one of the utilitarians gets behind the bench and says, look, I don't want to hear about your free speech. Did you or did you not violate this statute that says that you can't go out on the street and make a public speech? And the person says, what are you talking about? And the judge will keep saying, can you see the statute? Can you see, what's it say? What's it say? That's all I want to hear about. You're charged with simple, violation of the statute. And the other person is saying, look, you don't seem to hear what I'm saying. That the Constitution says that that is against the law, even though your local legislature has passed it. And Bull Connors wants to enforce it. And that's what's going on down the street in the courtroom right now. Is that they're attempting to say, look, the Kellogg-Briand Pact that was signed by the United States, an international treaty, the Nuremberg Accords, the Geneva Accords, all of these things, the United Nations General Assembly resolutions, all say that to declare weapons to be used against military non-combatants is a violation of international law. It is a violation of the rights of human beings, and it says so. And the judge says, don't talk to me about that stuff. I don't want to hear it. So that what you have is a very important issue here. There are 2 fundamental and traditionally sanctioned strains of thought inside Western culture concepts of justice. And what you have here is a dialogue taking place between the two. And that's what's happening. And the fact of the matter is that the people who support the natural law position have an ally, you see, that the other side doesn't have. It's not, big God in the sky, we're going to shoot thunderbolts at anybody. It's reality itself. It is the cosmos itself. That the balances and the powers that are manifesting in the cosmos are behind us. Is that we have the wind of reality at our back, and the other side does not.
That seems to imply that you have some kind of positive vision about reality.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What makes you think that it's going to turn out okay?
It's not absolutely certain that it is, by any means. There's a very interesting foot race underway right now. It's a rush. It's a race between the evolution of this particular philosophy inside our culture, this particular faculty of discernment, and Armageddon. There's not much question where the other's going. I mean, you talk to anybody and they'll tell you. You go to the average schoolhouse around the country and ask how many of the kids expect that they're going to die in a nuclear war, and you'll be astonished at the number of kids who will say, well, I assume that's the way it's going to end. And that's the way that I'm going to end, And people keep saying, my God, I mean, I didn't know that. I didn't know people were thinking about that all the time.
What about self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of that kind of expectation?
Well, what it is that it's a probability that the way things are running, if things continue to run the way they are, that's where it's going. And see, the problem is that's what the people assume. They assume that, well, things are going to continue going the way they are, and that I have no authority or way to interfere with that anyway, because that's what we're taught. Despite all the rhetoric in our schools, we're taught from the time we come in to obey the teacher, obey the policeman, to love the fireman, all these people that are the authority figures. They're the ones that make decisions. The fact of the matter is the time has come when the people assume that if the authority figures continue to do things the way they are, this is going to happen. The problem is that many of the people are paralyzed. They go, oh my God, what am I going to do? And that's the question. Once they ask the question, you say, oh, good, there's step one. If you assume that there's something that you can do, not that just can be done in the passive voice, but there's something you can do. Given whatever particular experience you've had, whatever your occupational skills are, whatever the religious training is that you've had, whatever part of the country you find yourself in, do not kid yourself and think that you don't have a role to play. No matter how big or how little you may think it is. My particular thing, I happen to have gone to law school and happen to have some abilities in that area, happen to have read certain things, given an opportunity, to have read a few of these things and talked with some of these people. So I just insert myself in where I can. And you have several hundreds of people here, all of whom have different charisms, they have different abilities, and some people can do nothing more or feel they can do nothing more than to hold up a protest sign on a courthouse. Others feel that they can stand in front of the court as one of the defendants and can suffer the potential jailing in prison and the actual jailing in prison that they've suffered. But they're all the same. They're all doing what they can do. They all feel the wind at their back, that they're being blown to this place. People don't come to this stuff willingly. People don't get off on this kind of stuff, contrary to certain criticism. That people are blown to the place where they are by the winds of reality. And the simple question is of whether we can get our people to get their sails up. Get up those sails so you can pick up the wind. And get in the wind so that you know what's happening, because it's a wind of change that's blowing now. It has a lot to do with religion. People can tell that. Something real interesting happened during the 70s to all the people of the 60s who were kind of hostile and antagonistic and anti-authoritarian and all that. Something real interesting happened during the 70s as they found out about TM and out about meditating, and they got back into talking about the churches and this evangelical movement and all this kind of stuff. Something very interesting happening. And the 80s are where it's going to manifest itself. You're getting a wedding between those two decades. And that's what's happening in the 80s. And it's just starting now. And it's not at all coincidental that some of the people who would be some of the prominent people in it are Dan and Phil Berrigan and the committed Christian people who were opposed to the war. That it's an absolute natural that these are the people who are out there doing this stuff, not pushing themselves into the forefront. You go, Dan Berrigan, a lot of people know, you go to all these meetings, you don't even hear him talk. You don't even see him sitting up where everybody can see him. He's sitting off in the audience with everybody else. They're doing the picking of the jury, and he's sitting there, and other people are doing the talking. He understands that all of the people have to come to empower ourselves, to know that we cannot rely upon, Father Berrigan or any of the other people to do this for us, because there aren't enough people to do that now. Everybody has to come out from where we are and do what we can do with the knowledge that we have on this thing. And that's what's happening. That's what you see happening here in Norristown now.
Do you think that there's any possibility for enlightened media in terms of being able to spark people to waking up?
Oh, it's essential. I think it's that whole long debate. It's a rather esoteric debate as to what are the means that are necessary to communicate to people the content of mystical experience. How do you do this? Do you just say, oh, they have to sit down and do all this meditation, or can you just tell them, and all of a sudden, can you read them sections of the Bible, and all of a sudden they'll go, oh, gee, I should have known that. It's a combination of all kinds of things. But it's essential that people in the media, now that some of the technology is becoming available, so you don't have to be super wealthy and entrenched in a lot of the cultural values, that you can get some of the equipment and the technology to move around and talk with people and to make this available to other people. It's essential. There's all kinds of stuff written by theologians now about the importance of the technology of the media. They're referring to it as radial man, that you can radiate out now the communications to other people, that they can come into contact with people. All they need to know is that, look, there's these other people. That guy doesn't look particularly far out. He isn't particularly great. There's nothing particularly great about him. Sounds a lot like, my kid brother or my older brother or my older sister. They talk like that. And they'll say, I'm just like these people. These people aren't supermen or anything else. They just happen to have fallen back onto the things they've always been taught when they were kids. I'm not going to stand for it. It's pure and simple. I was brought up and learned that you don't go killing people all over the place that are innocent. I hope I've got enough courage to just come out and say, am I nuts? Am I nuts that these people are doing all this crazy stuff? And when you turn around and start talking about that, the other person said, well, I've been thinking about this myself. I've been feeling really weird, all these strange things going on here. I was beginning to think I was nuts. And they're saying, well, at least there's two of us. Let's see if there's another one around. And people start coming around, and they find out that the events that our country is engaged in seem to be nuts. There's something really out of tune, out of wacko about what's going on. Now, even the people in positions of power, whether it be Carter, whether it be Nixon, or whether it be any of the people, whether it be Reagan, they'll tell you things are out of whack. They don't deny things are out of whack. They just got the idea that to get things back in whack, what you have to do is get back into commercialism. All you got to do is get more money to all these big companies and have them build more equipment and have them produce more things, more cars, get those cars rolling, and things will be okay. You see, they've gotten themselves hooked on material things rather than the spirit. And it's a very different value system.
So is that the actual conflict in terms of the reality that we're experiencing now? Is the material versus the spiritual?
I think so. I really think so. I think and that's what happens with utilitarianism and natural law. Utilitarianism thinks that it has to be real hard-nosed materialist. That the king and the government, you got to protect your territory and you got to do the things that are utilitarian and useful. And so that it's, in my personal opinion, that is the conflict here. Is that between it's materialism. Believing that all there is just material stuff. And because if all there is material stuff, there's no way that you can figure out what's right and wrong. The generalistic sort of existential position, or your sort of Hegelian dialectic, that, oh, well, there's no way to tell what's really true. You have your idea what's true, I got my idea what's true, let's have your thesis, my antithesis, let's just clash and let this thing run on. They really don't believe that there's any way to know what's true.
Well, it seems to provide the background or the justification for actually using nuclear weapons.
It does. It's that kind of conflict. It's that exact kind of thing. Our people don't seem to understand the importance of, across the country, 95% of the adult males every Sunday afternoon are sitting watching A team versus B team. The red team versus the blue team, fighting back and forth on the football field. They'll sit and they'll turn from one channel to the other. They don't even know who the teams are. And just sit and watch it go. There's this kind of mindless combat. And they'll tell you in our country that that's the only way things go, is you have to compete. You have to be tough. You have to be aggressive. You have to succeed. And that's the whole ethic. You have to be taught to be superior and to be successful and to get ahead in competition with others. If we gave a brand new Ford car to everybody in the country, there'd be a whole percentage of people who would want a Cadillac. That they've got to have something better than the others. It's a competition.
Well, what's the reverse to the competition?
The reverse to the competition is a unitary getting into balance, of really understanding what the needs are, the natural needs are that people have. And that there is a referent, there is a natural law referent to what is necessary, or what you've got to have. And the big piece of evidence is if someone's laying there dying, there's trouble. They're not getting something they need. Whether they need additional food, whether they need some shelter, whether they need something else. When people are dying, something's out of whack. When between June of 1974 and July of 1975, you have 10 million human beings starved to death on our planet, the hugest famine in the history of our species, and our government says, well, what do you want us to do about it? We can't send them all the grain or something because that's going to depress the cost. It's going to depress the price of grain. And you say, my God, somehow the price of grain for Cargill in these big agribusiness corporations is more important than 10 million human beings who are starving to death. And you say, something's wrong here. And death is the referent. Death is the referent. And when you come to the point where we're talking about the death of our species, when we're talking about all thermonuclear war, where we throw everything we've got and the Soviet Union throws everything it's got, we've got enough to destroy every living thing 42 times over. When you're talking about the death of the species, you're talking about the ultimate referent of wrong, that things are fundamentally out of whack. Ultimately out of whack. So the issue of coming together to talk about the production of nuclear weapons, which our country started, our country has fostered, our country has been ahead of the Soviet Union all the way up to 1969. We could have wiped them out and they couldn't have even gotten their stuff off the ground. Right? Yet we continue to do it. That means we're out of whack. We're out of touch with stuff. And so the question is, if you get into believing that material things in competition and competitiveness and that is your referent for determining what's good or bad, even to the point where our people in our country determine whether they're good or bad by how valued they are by the market system. How much you make it. As long as I'm making a lot, I feel like I'm really credited. I'm really valuable. I'm all endorsed, Oh, my son's a doctor. My son's a lawyer, Oh, good boy. But what? A doctor is taking warts off people's faces and stuff and making $100,000 a year doing plastic surgery, and hundreds of millions of people around the planet are dying from diseases that we've known the cure for decades. What's happening here? Things are out of whack because the alternative referent for value and motivation is money. It's gold, it's mammon. It's been talked about for 1,000 years by the Christian community. Once you go off onto that alternative referent, you get out of touch with the spirit in the winds and balance of nature. You are in serious trouble. And we are in serious trouble now. And so what you have is Reagan trying to salvage the dollar, salvage the economy, salvage this economic theory of competition unto the point of threatening the annihilation of the entire planet. That's the issues. It's the issues that the Christians want to talk about. It's the issue that the Christians have come to Norristown today to talk about. It is the issue that the judge doesn't want to hear about, because it undermines the whole structure of the authority that gives him his value. And so that has to get undone. It can't be undone out of hatred, can't be undone out of antagonism and confrontation, because that's the competition. You see, it's got to be done from affection, from endorsing, from caring. That's how it's got to get done.
Actually, I can go on. Do you guys want to ask something?
We really need to know what's good.
Yeah, we got to get heading out too.
All right, well, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Actually, I do have something.